The oppressive canopy of the Hastings wood strangles the moonlight, plunging the forest floor into an abyss of inky blackness. Frank, his face a canvas of grime and sweat, hobbles towards a weathered backpack nestled amongst the gnarled roots of a towering oak. Relief flickers in his eyes, a glimmer of civilization in this desolate wilderness. He reaches down, his trembling hand hesitantly brushing against the coarse canvas. A primal whiff of putrefaction assaults his nostrils, a stench so potent it claws at his throat. Grimacing, he fumbles for his flashlight, its beam a solitary beacon in the suffocating darkness. The light carves through the gloom, illuminating the fabric of the backpack. It's a worn, familiar form, a single thread of normalcy clinging desperately to this twisted nightmare. Hope flares briefly in Frank's chest. Maybe it belongs to another hiker, someone who can help him escape this verdant prison. With a surge of renewed determination, he hoists the pack onto a nearby rock, surprised by its unexpected weight. As he shifts it for a better look, the flashlight beam slices across a section of the backpack that makes his blood curdle. There, peeking out from a ripped flap, lies a grotesquely distorted hand. It protrudes from a sleeve, the fabric stained a sickening putrid brown. Frank's breath catches in his throat, a strangled sound that dies before escaping his lips. He trains the light further, the beam illuminating a horrifying tableau. A human form, clad in tattered hiking gear, sprawls on the forest floor, its body contorted into an unnatural position. The flesh is a sickly green, mottled with patches of inky black. Maggots writhe in the exposed wounds, their bodies glistening like malevolent pearls in the harsh light. The stench intensifies, a fetid cocktail of decay and something indescribably foul. Frank's stomach churns, the urge to vomit a constant battle within him. He recognizes the lifeless form in an instant. It's one of the missing hikers, his face frozen in a permanent rectus of unimaginable terror. The realization crashes over him like a tidal wave. He's not alone in these woods. But the company is far worse than he could have ever conceived. A primal scream builds in his throat, but Frank forces it down, replaced by a chilling silence that hangs heavy in the stagnant air. He knows, with a sickening certainty, that the Hastings woods hold a secret far more sinister than just getting lost. A cold dread seeps into his bones, a paralyzing fear that threatens to consume him whole. In the heart of the woods, something evil lurks, and Frank has stumbled right into its domain. Frank remains frozen, his gaze locked on the gruesome tableau before him. The fetid smell assaults him like a physical blow, but his terror overrides nausea. Slowly, with a morbid fascination, his eyes trace the dead hiker's body. His gaze lands on a protruding object from the man's pocket, a small, dented digital camera. A flicker of hope ignites within him. Maybe the camera holds clues, a final glimpse into the missing hiker's fate. With trembling fingers, he reaches down and retrieves the camera. Dusting it off on his tattered shirt, he fumbles with the buttons. The screen flickers to life, revealing a low battery warning. His heart pounds a frantic rhythm against his ribs as he navigates the menu. A single video file sits alone in the memory. With a deep breath, Frank presses play. The screen erupts with grainy footage of the Hastings woods at night. The dead hiker narrates in a hushed voice, describing the eerie silence and the oppressive darkness. Then, the footage jolts. The hiker stumbles backward, his voice rising in panic. "What the?" he gasps, the camera flailing wildly. In the background, a horrifying figure comes into view, impossibly tall and skeletal, clad in a black suit. Its long, featureless face seems to warp the very fabric of reality. Slender Man. The image flickers violently, the figure extending an unnaturally long limb towards the camera. A choked scream pierces the sudden silence as the footage cuts abruptly to black. The camera tumbles to the forest floor, the sickening crunch of impact echoing in the stillness. Frank stares at the blank screen, the image of Slender Man burned into his retinas. His breath comes in ragged gasps as the horrifying truth slams into him. The hiker wasn't just lost, he was stalked, hunted, and ultimately claimed by the entity from the web. A whimper escapes his lips, a sound devoid of hope. He clutches the camera to his chest, a cold sweat slicking his skin. The woods groan around him, the symphony of death a constant reminder of the monstrous presence that lurks within their depths. "So this hiker Slender Man," Frank whispers, his voice barely audible above the pounding of his terrified heart. He knows, with chilling certainty, that he's not just lost. He's trapped in a game of predator and prey, and he's just become the target. Paralyzed by the horrifying revelation on the camera, Frank remains glued to the spot. The stench of decay seems to intensify, a suffocating shroud around him. The silence that follows the screams in the footage is deafening, broken only by the erratic thump of his terrified heart. Suddenly, a twig snaps. It's a faint sound, barely audible over his ragged breaths, but enough to send a jolt of fresh terror through him. His head snaps towards the source of the noise, his eyes desperately searching the dense foliage. The flashlight beam dances frantically in his trembling hands, illuminating twisted branches and tangled roots, but revealing nothing. He strains to hear, his ears attuned to any rustle, any whisper in the wind. Time stretches, each second an eternity punctuated by his own desperate gasps. Just when he starts to convince himself it's just his imagination, the sound returns. A low scratching noise, like claws dragging against bark, originates from behind him. Frank spins on his heels, the beam of the flashlight sweeping through the darkness. But again, the woods remain silent, the trees cloaked in an unnerving stillness. Panic begins to claw at his throat. The silence is worse, his mind conjuring up 1,000 horrors that lurk in the shadows. As if responding to his fear, the sound returns, this time closer, right beside him. He whirls the flashlight, desperately searching. His beam catches a glimpse of movement, a flicker in the corner of his vision. He pivots towards it, his hand tightening on the flashlight. The light falls upon a towering oak, its bark twisting like gnarled fingers towards the moonless sky. A wave of nausea crashes over him. He isn't looking at a tree anymore. The bark seems to ripple and bulge, like a grotesque parody of human flesh. A low, guttural growl emanates from the distorted form, sending a shiver down his spine. Terror explodes within him. Hey, who's there? He screams, his voice cracking with fear. Silence. Then, slowly, agonizingly slowly, the bark on the opposite side of the tree starts to split. From the darkness, something unspeakable emerges. It's an unnaturally long tentacle-like arm, impossibly thin and pale. It writhes and pulsates, devoid of bone or muscle, a grotesque appendage that defies all natural order. Frank lets out a strangled cry, the camera tumbling from his grasp. He doesn't wait to see what follows. With a primal roar, he turns and sprints towards the cabin, his legs pumping like pistons despite the searing pain in his ankle. The chilling whispers of the woods pursue him, a chorus of malice that fills his ears, urging him ever onward. He doesn't dare look back. He knows that if he does, he'll see the horrifying form of Slender Man emerging from the shadows, his long, skeletal fingers reaching out to claim him. The cabin, his only hope, seems miles away, a distant beacon in the suffocating darkness. Frank's lungs burn like fire, his legs screaming in protest with every pounding step. He doesn't dare look back, the chilling whispers of the forest clawing at his sanity. The cabin, his only hope, remains frustratingly distant, a faint outline against the oppressive dark. He stumbles out of the tree line, bursting into the clearing where the cabin sits. Relief crashes over him like a tidal wave, momentarily eclipsing the terror coursing through his veins. With a cry that rips from his throat, he slams his body against the wooden door. The sound explodes in the stillness of the night, a desperate plea for sanctuary. The thunderous knock echoes through the cabin, jolting Lisa, Jake, and Chris awake. They scramble out of bed, a chorus of groggy questions erupting from their lips. Fear replaces confusion as they hear the frantic pounding on the door. Lisa throws on a robe, her hand instinctively reaching for the baseball bat resting by the fireplace. Jake and Chris follow suit, their faces etched with concern in the dim light filtering through the windows. They tiptoe down the stairs, Lisa clutching the bat like a talisman. Reaching the door, she peeks through the small peephole. A distorted image of Frank, his face contorted with terror, fills the tiny space. Without hesitation, she throws open the door. Frank stumbles in, collapsing onto the floor in a heap. He gasps for air, his body racked with uncontrollable tremors. The door slams shut behind him with a satisfying thud, the heavy bolt thrown in place as if for emphasis. Lisa kneels beside him, concern etched on her face. "Frank, what happened? Are you alright?" But Frank can only manage ragged gasps, his eyes wide with terror. He glances at his friends, their worried faces swimming in and out of focus. Finally, he croaks out, "Slender Man, he's here." The room falls silent. The name hangs in the air, heavy with dread. Lisa, Jake, and Chris exchange hesitant glances. The terror in Frank's voice is undeniable, and a cold chill creeps down their spines. They may not have witnessed the horrors of the woods firsthand, but they know enough to understand the gravity of his words. The sanctuary of the cabin feels a little less secure now, the darkness outside pressing against the walls as if testing for weaknesses. They huddle together, a small band of survivors against an unseen and terrifying foe. The long night has only just begun. The air hangs thick with tension. Lisa holds Frank close, her trembling hand stroking his hair in a silent attempt to soothe his frantic breaths. Jake paces the room, frustration etched on his face. Chris, ever the skeptic, scoffs. "Slender Man. Come on, Frank, you're scaring us. That's just a creepy internet story." Frank lifts his head, his eyes bloodshot and wild. "No, Chris. He's real. I saw him in the woods." Lisa shoots Chris a worried glance, but remains silent. The raw terror in Frank's voice is a stark contrast to his usual easygoing demeanor. "Wait, Frank," Jake interjects, calming himself. "How do you know Slender Man is here? Did you see him?" Frank nods frantically. "I went out to the woods. I heard someone calling for help." He pauses, reliving the horror in his mind's eye. There was a backpack, a dead hiker, and a camera. He struggles to his feet, swaying slightly. Lisa helps him to a chair, offering him a glass of water. He takes a shaky sip, then continues. "The camera, it had footage. The hiker, he recorded Slender Man before." Frank trails off, unable to finish the sentence. The memory of the chilling scream still echoes in his ears. Jake throws his hands up in exasperation. "Are you crazy, Frank? You could have gotten yourself killed out there. There are plenty of wild animals in those woods. You probably just saw a bear or something." Chris snorts in agreement. "Or maybe Bigfoot. Come on, man, use your head." But Frank shakes his head, his voice gaining strength. "No, Jake. It wasn't an animal. It was Slender Man. I saw his arm. It came out of a tree. Long and unnatural. He reaches into his pocket, pulling out the camera. Look, the footage is still here. You can see for yourselves. Lisa takes the camera from his trembling grasp. A sense of dread washes over her as she looks at its scratched exterior. Hesitantly, she turns it on. The screen flickers to life, displaying the low battery warning. Her heart races as she navigates the menu, finding the single video file. The heavy silence descends upon the room as Lisa presses play. The grainy footage unfolds before them, showing the dead hiker exploring the woods. As they watch, a jolt of movement sends chills down their spines. The camera work becomes erratic, a muffled scream piercing the night. Then, a horrifying figure appears, tall and skeletal, clad in a black suit. Its long featureless face seems to warp the very image. The silence after the video playback is heavy, punctuated only by the ragged breaths of the shaken group. Lisa clutches the camera in her lap, the chilling images burned into her mind. Frank leans back in his chair, his face drained of color. Suddenly, the room plunges into darkness. A collective gasp escapes their lips as the lights flicker and die. "Oh no, the generator!" Jake exclaims, scrambling towards the window. He peers out into the inky blackness. Must have tripped a breaker. Someone probably messed with it accidentally. A nervous chuckle escapes his lips, but it lacks conviction. The air crackles with a different kind of tension now, the darkness amplifying their fear. Chris, who moments ago scoffed at the idea of Slender Man, speaks in a hushed tone. "Now I'm starting to believe you, Frank. That footage, it was seriously creepy." Lisa nods mutely, her eyes wide in the darkness. "Yeah," Jake concedes, his voice laced with a hint of fear. "Never thought Slender Man would actually be real, you know." The weight of their isolation settles upon them like a suffocating cloak. The cabin, once a source of comfort, now feels exposed and vulnerable. The unseen horrors of the woods seem to press against the walls, waiting for an opportunity to breach their fragile sanctuary. "We need to get the generator back on," Jake continues, his voice taking on a determined edge. "There should be a spare fuse box outside." He fumbles for his phone, using its flickering light as a makeshift torch. "I'll go check it out." "Lisa, stay with Frank." "Chris, any ideas for alternative light sources?" Lisa nods, a silent agreement forming between them. Fear binds them together, a fragile unity against the unknown threat that lurks outside. Chris rummages through a drawer, pulling out a box of matches and a few candles. Not much, but it's better than nothing. The flickering light of the phone illuminates Jake's face, etched with a mixture of fear and determination. The flickering candlelight casts long, distorted shadows on the cabin walls. Lisa clutches Frank close, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. Every creak from the outside sends a jolt of terror through them. Suddenly, a voice cuts through the thick silence. "No, Jake. Are you crazy? Slender Man will kill you out there." Frank's voice is laced with panic. Jake emerges from the doorway, his face a mask of frustration. "Then what do you suggest we do? Sit here in the dark, waiting for whatever's out there to find us?" "We have to stay together," Chris interjects. "There's no point in taking unnecessary risks." Lisa nods in agreement, her voice barely a whisper. Chris is right. We'll figure something out. But Frank hesitates, a flicker of urgency replacing his fear. "Wait, guys, there's one last thing we haven't checked in this cabin." Intrigue replaces Lisa's fear for a moment. What is it, Frank? Frank gestures towards a shadowed corner of the room. The basement. There's a door there, haven't even checked if it's locked. Hope flickers in their eyes. Maybe, just maybe, there's something useful down there, a spare battery, a different light source, anything that could help them survive the night. They huddle together and approach the basement door. It's a solid oak door, reinforced with heavy hinges and a large padlock. Jake reaches out and jiggles the handle. Oh, fantastic. Locked tight. This just ruined the mood. Disappointment washes over them. But just as quickly, a new determination sets in. They can't just sit here in the dark, waiting for whatever lurks outside to claim them. They have to be proactive. With newfound resolve, they begin to brainstorm. Perhaps Chris knows something about picking locks. Maybe Lisa can find something around the cabin heavy enough to force the door open. Maybe there's another way into the basement they haven't considered. The darkness presses in on them, a tangible entity that fuels their fear. But within that fear, a spark of defiance ignites. They are not helpless prey. They will fight. They will survive. As they huddle together, their voices low but united, a plan begins to take shape. The basement door may be locked, but their will to survive is not. Hope flickers like a dying candle as Frank, guided by the feeble beam of his flashlight, searches the dusty corners of the basement. Cobwebs brush against their faces, and the air is thick with the scent of damp earth and forgotten memories. The silence is broken only by the rasp of their breaths and the nervous creak of the stairs they descended moments ago. Disappointment hangs heavy in the air. The basement appears to be nothing more than a cramped storage room. Suddenly, Frank lets out a gasp, the flashlight beam illuminating a dusty shelf tucked away in a corner. Perched on the edge sits a single old-fashioned keyring, adorned with an ornately carved silver key. A surge of excitement jolts through the group. With trembling hands, Frank reaches out and retrieves the keyring. Could it be the key to the basement door? Could it be the key to something more? With bated breath, he approaches the locked oak door. The key slides into the padlock with a satisfying click. The rusted hinges groan in protest as Frank pushes the door open, revealing a narrow passageway leading deeper into the darkness. Tentative, Lisa gasps, reaching out to brush away a layer of dust from a framed photograph on the wall. "George Carter," she whispers, her voice filled with recognition. The others crowd around, their faces etched with confusion. "Wait, isn't that the name the old caretaker mentioned?" Frank asks, a flicker of hope sparking in his eyes. Their hearts pound as they examine the faded photograph. There stands George Carter, a younger version of the weathered man they met, a wide smile gracing his lips. Was this room his former study? Did it hold the key to their survival? As if guided by an unseen hand, Lisa reaches for a leather-bound book nestled amongst piles of yellowed papers. Its pages are filled with cryptic symbols and strange, archaic-looking script. "Listen to this," she says, her voice trembling with excitement. It's an incantation, a ritual to banish a malevolent entity. The collective gasp escapes their lips. Could this be what they've been searching for? A way to defeat Slender Man? Lisa flips through the pages, her eyes scanning the text. Apparently, Slender Man has a weakness, she continues, her voice rising with a hint of triumph. Halogen light. It weakens him, disrupts his ability to move freely. A flicker of hope ignites in their eyes. "So, a halogen lamp?" Jake asks, a grin spreading across his face. "Exactly," Lisa confirms. "If we can find one and perform this ritual correctly." She trails off, but the meaning hangs heavy in the air. They may have stumbled upon the answer they desperately needed. A way to banish the horrifying entity that stalks them. But a deep-seated fear still lingers. Will they be able to find a halogen lamp in time? Can they perform the ritual flawlessly under such pressure? The answer lies buried within the dusty pages of the ancient book, a beacon of hope in the face of unimaginable terror. Excitement crackles in the air, a stark contrast to the oppressive darkness that still holds the cabin captive. Lisa clutches the ancient book, its words a potential lifeline in their fight against the unseen terror. Hope thrums in their veins, fueled by the discovery of Slender Man's weakness and the banishing ritual. Frank takes center stage, his hand holding aloft a dusty halogen lamp. He plugs it into a nearby socket, and a wave of relief washes over them as the room floods with bright artificial light. The shadows retreat, banished to the corners, offering a temporary sense of security. "Let's go," Lisa declares, her voice firm with newfound resolve. They huddle together, the book clutched tightly in her grasp. As they emerge from the basement, a fresh wave of fear washes over them. The night seems even darker, the silence more profound. They strain to hear any sound, any movement in the woods that might signal Slender Man's approach. Suddenly, a sound pierces the suffocating quiet, a soft melodic chiming of bells. It's faint at first, like a whisper on the wind, but it grows steadily louder, closer. Frank's face pales. No, guys. Don't listen to it," he shouts, his voice laced with panic. "It's a lure. It means Slender Man is near." Terror replaces the hope that had momentarily filled their hearts. Jake and Chris stumble back, their eyes wide with dread. "Oh no," Chris whimpers, his voice barely a whisper. Lisa steps forward, her voice trembling but resolute. "Frank, you have the halogen lamp, right?" "Yes," Frank confirms, his grip tightening on the lamp. "It's on." The bright beam cuts through the darkness, casting a protective circle around them. It's a small comfort, but it's all they have. Lisa opens the book, her voice calm amidst the rising chaos. "We need to perform this ritual perfectly. One wrong word, one wrong move, and..." She trails off, but they all understand the horrifying consequence of failure. With a deep breath, she begins to recite the ancient words, her voice ringing out in the night. The air crackles with a strange energy as the ritual unfolds. The chiming of the bells grows louder, more insistent, a malevolent melody beckoning them towards an unseen doom. But they stand their ground, the halogen lamp their only shield, the words their only weapon. As Lisa reaches the final verse, the forest explodes in a cacophony of sound. Branches snap, leaves rustle, and a horrifying shriek tears through the night. A monstrous figure emerges from the tree line, its form a grotesque parody of humanity. Slender Man has arrived. The forest writhes as Slender Man emerges from the darkness. Towering and skeletal, his form seems to defy the laws of physics. Long, featureless tendrils writhe behind him like malevolent serpents. Chris and Jake, who have only witnessed Slender Man through the grainy footage, gasp in terror. Their blood runs cold at the sight of this horrifying entity made flesh. Before they can react, a tentacle shoots out from the tangled darkness, impossibly long and skeletal. It wraps around Jake's waist with a sickening crunch, dragging him screaming towards Slender Man's gaping maw. "Eyes. Nuo." Jake's cry pierces the night, laced with raw fear. Chris and Lisa scream in unison, their desperate pleas lost in the cacophony of terror. But Frank reacts with a desperate instinct. He whips the halogen lamp around, bathing Slender Man in its harsh, unforgiving light. The effect is immediate. Slender Man recoils with a shrieking hiss, a sound that chills them to the bone. The tendril slackens its grip on Jake, releasing him with a sickening thud. Jake stumbles forward, collapsing onto the ground beside Frank. Together, they scramble to their feet, fueled by a primal urge to survive. Slender Man writhes in the halogen light, his form flickering like an image on a faulty screen. It's a momentary reprieve, but enough for them to know what they have to do. "Run!" Lisa screams, her voice hoarse with fear. Without hesitation, all four of them turn and sprint away from the clearing, the forest floor swallowing them in a blur of darkness. They don't dare look back, the chilling sound of Slender Man's enraged shrieks urging them ever onward. Their lungs burn, their legs scream in protest, but they push themselves further, driven by a desperate need to escape the clutches of the entity that hunts them. Branches claw at their clothes, roots trip them up, but they keep going. Behind them, the forest echoes with the unearthly sounds of Slender Man's pursuit. The chiming of the bells grows fainter with each step they take, a chilling reminder of the danger they've barely escaped. They have a head start, a precious advantage thanks to the halogen lamp. But will it be enough? Will they outrun the relentless entity that stalks them? The answer remains shrouded in the darkness, as uncertain as their very survival. Their lungs burn like fire, legs screaming in protest as they push themselves to the limit. The forest floor blurs beneath their feet, a chaotic tapestry of roots and fallen branches. Fear propels them forward, the chilling shrieks of Slender Man echoing ever closer behind. They stumble through the undergrowth, a desperate pack fleeing a relentless predator. Chris trips over a hidden root, tumbling to the ground with a cry of pain. Frank hesitates for a split second, then throws him a desperate glance. "Keep going. I'll catch up," he shouts, his voice hoarse with exertion. Chris scrambles to his feet, a mixture of fear and determination etched on his face. Together, Frank and Lisa continue their frantic escape, the image of Jake and Chris fading into the darkness behind them. They burst into a clearing, a small patch of moonlit ground, offering a temporary glimpse of their surroundings. But the respite is short-lived. Slender Man emerges from the tree line at the far end of the clearing, his skeletal form a monstrous silhouette against the pale moonlight. He moves with unnatural speed, closing the distance between them with each elongated stride. A wave of despair washes over Lisa. They're trapped, cornered like prey with nowhere left to run. Suddenly, Slender Man lunges. One of his long, skeletal tendrils shoots out, wrapping around Lisa's waist with a sickening snap. She screams, a high-pitched cry that pierces the night. Frank lunges for the halogen lamp, a desperate plan forming in his mind. With a surge of adrenaline, he flips the switch, bathing Slender Man in its harsh light. For a moment, Slender Man recoils with a shrieking hiss. But this time, his reaction is different. Another tentacle materializes, black and insubstantial like a shadow. It slams into the halogen lamp, sending it flying through the air. It crashes to the ground, shattering into a million pieces. Darkness consumes the clearing once more, the only light source the faint glow of the moon. Jake, who had fallen behind moments ago, witnesses the scene in horror. He grabs a broken branch from the fallen tree beside him, a surge of desperate courage burning in his chest. With a primal scream, he charges towards Slender Man, the makeshift weapon raised high. But before he can even reach the monstrous figure, Slender Man turns his attention towards him. Another tendril whips out, wrapping around Jake with inhuman strength. He lets out a choked cry, the branch clattering to the ground. The tendril lifts him high into the air, bringing him face to face with Slender Man's gaping maw. Lisa screams again, tears streaming down her face. She struggles against the tendril that holds her captive, but it is an unyielding force. Her gaze meets Frank's, a silent plea for help hanging in the air. But Frank is helpless. He stands alone, the weight of his failure crushing him. He has no weapons, no light, nothing to stop Slender Man from claiming his friends. As Slender Man prepares to strike, a horrifying realization dawns on Frank. This isn't the end. It's just the beginning. He has failed to protect his friends, failed to defeat Slender Man. Now, he must face the consequences, alone and afraid, in the heart of a terrifying forest. The darkness closes in, suffocating and final, as Slender Man's horrifying shrieks fill the night. The fate of Lisa and Jake remains unknown, lost in the clutches of an entity beyond human comprehension. Frank, the sole survivor, is left to grapple with the chilling reality Slender Man is real, and the hunt has just begun. The clearing is bathed in an oppressive silence, broken only by the ragged gasps of Lisa and the chilling symphony of Slender Man's inhuman shrieks. The halogen lamp lies in pieces, a shattered symbol of their fading hope. Frank watches in horror as a skeletal tendril of Slender Man writhes towards Jake. It moves with a sickening speed, a malevolent serpent aiming for its prey. A scream tears from Jake's throat as the tendril pierces his chest with an inhuman snap. Jake. Nero. Frank's voice is a raw cry of anguish, his body rebelling against the urge to run and hide. But he stands frozen, a helpless witness to the horrific scene unfolding before him. Lisa's screams turn into a choked sob as Slender Man draws the tendril back, dragging Jake closer with a sickening wet sound. The tendril pulsates with an unnatural light, draining the life force from Jake's body. His screams die into whimpers, then silence. His eyes, wide with terror, meet Frank's for a fleeting moment before glazing over, devoid of life. A wave of nausea crashes over Frank, the stench of decay filling his nostrils. Suddenly, Slender Man's form begins to contort. His skeletal frame seems to warp and twist, his limbs lengthening and contorting. With a guttural growl, he engulfs Jake in his shadowy form. It's a grotesque act of consumption, a horror that defies all logic and reason. When the final tremor subsides, Slender Man stands tall, his form seemingly larger, his skeletal frame tinged with a faint luminescence that wasn't there before. A single scream rips from Lisa's throat, raw and primal in its terror. Frank stumbles back, his vision blurring with tears. He has witnessed the unthinkable, the violent demise of his friend, consumed by this monstrous entity. The weight of despair threatens to crush him. He glances back at the forest edge, searching for Chris. A glimmer of hope ignites within him. Maybe, just maybe, Chris managed to escape. But that hope quickly flickers out as he sees Chris emerge from the tree line, his face contorted in a mask of terror. Their eyes meet, a silent exchange of despair passing between them. They are alone now, the last two survivors facing a foe they barely understand. Slender Man turns his attention towards them, his featureless face seeming to bore into their very souls. The remaining tendrils writhe, a chilling promise of a gruesome end. Frank feels his body go numb, a strange sense of calm settling over him in the face of inevitable doom. There's nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. With a final chilling shriek, Slender Man lunges towards them. The darkness closes in, swallowing Chris whole in a single horrific motion. As the tendrils reach for Frank, a wave of black engulfs him. His scream is lost in the cacophony of the night, a final, desperate plea against a relentless predator. The clearing falls silent once more, the only sound the rustling of leaves in the wind. All that remains are scattered fragments of the halogen lamp, a ghostly reminder of a desperate fight and a chilling defeat. The forest has claimed its prey. Slender Man stands alone, his form pulsing with a faint, stolen light. In the distance, the faint chiming of unseen bells begins to echo once more, a chilling melody marking the end of their desperate struggle and the beginning of a new hunt. In the aftermath of the horrific scene, Chris emerges from the darkness, his face pale and drawn. He stumbles towards the clearing, his eyes wide with terror. Grief and a desperate will to survive war within him. He spots Lisa, dangling helplessly in one of Slender Man's tendrils. Her screams pierce the night, a raw plea for help. But Chris is alone, his friend Frank nowhere to be seen. Fueled by a surge of defiance, Chris scoops up a stone from the ground and hurls it at Slender Man. It's a pathetic attempt, a mere pebble against a monstrous entity. The stone strikes Slender Man with a dull thud, barely registering. In response, a tendril lashes out with inhuman speed, slamming into Chris's chest. He lets out a choked cry, his body thrown backwards like a rag doll. He crashes against a nearby tree, the impact knocking the wind out of him. Pain explodes through his chest, but he forces himself to his knees, his gaze fixed on Lisa's terrified face. Slender Man glides towards her, his skeletal frame pulsating with an unnatural light. Lisa struggles against the tendril's grip, her screams echoing through the silent forest. Suddenly, a memory jolts Frank back to reality. The book. He remembers seeing it lying on the ground when Slender Man lifted Lisa. Hope reignites within him, a flicker of defiance in the face of despair. Ignoring the searing pain in his shoulder, a wound inflicted by one of Slender Man's tendrils, Frank lunges for the book. His fingers brush against the worn leather cover, sending a surge of relief through him. But before he can grab it fully, another tendril slams into his side, sending him sprawling to the ground. Blood spills from his wound, staining the forest floor crimson. Lisa screams his name, her voice filled with terror and despair. Slender Man looms closer, his featureless face a mere inches from hers. With a final, desperate effort, Frank gathers himself and grabs the book. He flips through the pages frantically, his eyes searching for the words that might save them. The world seems to blur around him, the only sound the pounding of his own heart and Lisa's chilling screams. Then, he finds it, the passage titled The Banishment Chant. Hesitantly, he raises his voice, the words tasting like ashes on his tongue. With words of power, the pact we break. The Slender Man's curse, we choose to forsake. His voice rings out in the night, a desperate plea against the encroaching darkness. Slender Man pauses, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his form. Frank continues, reading the chant with increasing urgency. Each word is a gamble, a desperate hope against a terrifying unknown. The crimson seal, with sunlight burned. His hold on this world, forever spurned. As he reads, a faint glow emanates from the book, a warm light pushing back against the oppressive darkness that surrounds them. The token we give, a life we spare. To appease the darkness, a burden to bear. Lisa screams one last time, a sound filled with terror and a hint of hope. The glow from the book intensifies, bathing the clearing in an ethereal light. The Slender Man's hunger, we momentarily quell, granting passage back from this earthly hell. With the final words spoken, the clearing explodes in a blinding flash of light. The book crumbles to dust in Frank's hand, the remaining pages scattering in the wind. Silence descends. The light fades, leaving them bathed in the cool glow of the moon. Slender Man is gone. Lisa hangs limply in the air, the tendril that held her now slack and lifeless. Frank scrambles to his feet, his body screaming in protest. He rushes to Lisa and cuts her free with a shard of fallen glass. Tears stream down his face as he cradles her in his arms. She gasps, her eyes fluttering open. Relief washes over him as she looks at him, her face pale but alive. Chris stumbles towards them, his hand clutching his injured chest. They huddle together, the survivors of a nightmarish encounter. The forest around them is silent, the only sound their ragged breaths and the chirping of crickets. Slender Man is gone, for now. The forest stirs with the awakening of a new day. Birdsong replaces the chilling silence of the night, a melody of hope amidst the devastation. The clearing where they fought for their lives stands eerily still, bathed in the soft glow of dawn. Slender Man is gone. His absence hangs heavy in the air, a weight only partially lifted by the sliver of hope that flickers within them. Lisa, her face streaked with tears and exhaustion, throws her arms around Frank. Relief and gratitude mix with a lingering fear that courses through her veins. He saved her life. Frank, his body a canvas of pain, holds her close. A wee chuckle escapes his lips, a sound that speaks volumes of their shared ordeal. "It's over, guys," he whispers, his voice hoarse. "We did it." Chris, dragging himself towards them with a grimace of pain, reaches out a hand. Slowly, he gasps, blood staining his shirt. "You did it, Frank. You're a real hero. You saved us all." Frank shakes his head, his smile fading slightly. "Without you guys," he says, his voice filled with sincerity, "I wouldn't have stood a chance. It was teamwork. We survived together." Lisa leans into Frank, seeking solace in his presence. Finally, she murmurs, her voice trembling. It's finally over. Frank nods, his gaze meeting Chris's. Yeah, he breathes, a hint of defiance in his voice. We're alive to see the dawn. Together, they huddle against each other, a trio bound by shared trauma and a newfound resilience. The physical wounds they bear are a stark reminder of the horrors they faced, a constant echo of the battle they fought against an entity beyond human comprehension. But as the first rays of sunlight break through the canopy, painting the sky with vibrant hues of orange and pink, a sliver of hope blossoms within them. They survived the night. They are battered, wounded, but alive.